I talked about I talked about the Chevron deference and that the Loper Bright Enterprises and Raimondo case. And I talked about the impact that that is going to have if you want to do a rights type of case, something, anything based upon rights. You got to know what those rights are to make that kind of an argument, though. And now it's all new. I mean, the whole structure and the whole way you're going to do it has just changed because of that case. Because um, before this last month or two, whenever this case was finally done, it was in June 28th, 2024. So it's real recent. Before that, we were living under what's called the Chevron case. And the Chevron case was essentially a ruling where the Supreme Court says to all courts and agencies that, hey, you know what? You can just kind of interpret the law and then you write the regulations, and that'll essentially be the law people have to follow. Well, if you think about how they wrote that, you should see that there's a problem with that because they're making massive, broad interpretations, creating literally thousands of new laws out of thin air. And last time I checked, the IRS or the Food and Drug Administration or the whatever, Homeland Security, they don't get to write their own laws. But yet the Chevron deference effectively says to anyone involved that, hey, you know what, we'll just defer to the agency on that. Wait a minute, that's like saying let them write the laws. That's the problem with that whole approach to things. Okay. You just can't um, just let agencies make up their own rules. They got to follow the law. So this Loper Bright Enterprises Raimondo decision essentially, again, putting it in my own words, but as I understand it, it says, if you got ambiguous or broad regulations and statutes, they've got to be clearly explained. So it throws it back to either Congress to rewrite these laws, a whole lot of them, or to the court, who, if they're just an administrative court, they can't just interpret that law, but there has to be an actual court ruling with full due process. That means civil proceeding, right to trial by jury, all that, not just some quick administrative ruling, because you have a right to full due process. Now, of course, the argument against it was, well, this is going to burden the system. It's everybody's going to be overwhelmed with, the system now. Now the courts have to get involved in every decision. No, no, Congress needs to write clearer decisions, and also we need a lot fewer laws. And so one of the subjects that's going to cover tonight is how Justice Gorsuch and a few of the other Supreme Court justices are now commenting on this, um, that, hey, this is getting to be too much, not just a little too much, but way too much. And there's a couple of books I read a couple of years ago. One was called Licensed to Lie, and another book called Three Felonies a Day. It's Licensed to Lie and Three Felonies a Day. You can go look those up. Now that's where I really started getting on this bandwagon of hey, we can argue about whether we're the straw man and all these other things, but the system operates under this massive construct of laws that's growing so fast that you really can't even track it. And are they laws is the question. Now, of course, there's the question of whether it's even lawful at all. Are they acting extrajudicially? Are they acting on their own authority? Which, when an agency makes up its own rules and follows them, that's what they're doing. And guess what? In effect, that's now unconstitutional. That's now unconstitutional. You have the ability to challenge them on, show me that the regulation you're following, because they'll cite the statute. The problem is the statute is supposed to be interpreted for you, if not clearly written. And most of them are not clearly written. Do you think the IRS code with 8,000 pages of 6-point font is clearly written for the average person to understand? Of course not. And so therefore it's subject to a broad range of interpretations. And I pick on that because so many of us do deal with that agency. Well, guess what? They can't take Title 27 regulations, not laws, and apply them to Title 26 actions. Each statute has its own set of regulations that should be implemented, but they're not. Most of Title 26 regulations are not implemented, which means they're fully written, they're reviewed by Congress, they're put in the Federal Register. Most of them are not even in there. Why? Because this was never done. So their enforcement authority is called into question, and it can be challenged now. I hope you get that. And this could apply to child support services. It could be the family services where they're trying to take your kids. It could be traffic agencies, even in your state, because even at a state level, if they're violating your rights, you have the right now to challenge them. It was tougher to do before. It just got easier. That's all I'm saying. But you got to make it a reasonable, sound argument. And I'd suggest using this court case. And I just added a file to the premium member traffic folder. And it's also on, let's see if I can find that real quick. Actually, while I'm just thinking about it, let me see if I can look it up. Uh, bu- 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 uh, there we go. So you'll find this file in your premium member traffic folder. I think this has some really good points, and this was somewhat based upon some review of this Supreme Court decision. This is a way to challenge traffic court, something we just added in here, and it's based purely on, can they really force you, even though you have a license? Let's say you do have or you don't have. Maybe you're traveling just with your passport card, which is what a lot of people do instead of having the license. But if they say, well, you need to have a license, you need to have this, you need to do that, you got to follow this rule, these regulations. Well, okay, do you have jurisdiction to tell me that? Okay. And this is a petition for redress of grievances to correct the malfeasance associated with the administration of justice. They're administering their own justice. They can't do that now. So this document, you can go read it. It's I don't know how many pages it is. It's quite a few, but you could pick and choose a lot of this or use the whole thing to challenge a traffic case. But you could use it to challenge any administrative agency. You're just going to have to change some language because most of this was written for a traffic case. But you could go find your own law and take the same approach on that. We're not here, by the way, to break down the system. We're not here to destroy the system. We're trying to show that the system's gone way over it, way extended, way beyond its authority and its limits. In the elections are talking about the administrative state. Not enough, by the way, but the administrative state, or some call it the deep state, whatever you want to call it. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about this whole level of government that doesn't exist, yet it runs the whole system. It doesn't exist because the statutes aren't properly fully implemented. And this is across many federal and state statutes. So if you take that mindset as you look at a case, you're looking for the defect in their case. Well, let's start with their very jurisdiction. They may say they have it, and you ask the court, I want you to tell me if you have jurisdiction. Well, they're going to say, well, we have it because they know what you don't they know you don't know what you're asking. You have to put it in the proper motion and use the proper legal argument. Okay. Take some work. But with this new case law, this new Supreme Court case, you do have an additional tool to use. Okay. So just keep that in mind. I see people raising their hands. That's fine. I won't be taking any questions till we go through certain portions of our teaching. Let's see. I even changed the headline to our website. Everyone has a legal issue at some point. We're drowning statutes, codes, and contracts, including bank debts, civil issues, or even criminal matters. A lot of them are created by federal agencies, not by Congress. They may cite a congressional act, but the implementation of it's got to be fully explained to the public so you know what the law even says. And that's usually not done. So something to think about. Let's go to the Gorsuch article quickly here. So it says, Neil Gorsuch says Americans are getting thwacked by too many laws. Sorry about the dog. As Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch sees it, an explosion in the complexity of the nation's regulations. Now, you notice he's not saying laws, regulations. Regulations are agency things. Is overburdening Americans and often trampling their rights and livelihoods. Guys, this is why this is the one part I like about what Trump did is he pushed for constitutional oriented judges rather than political oriented judges. This is not a political thing. This is according to what the Constitution says. So less than a century ago, the laws of the United States could fit into a single book, less than a century ago. But since they've swelled to fill enough volumes to take up an entire shelf in his office, Gorsuch said Thursday night during a conversation with the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley. The Federal Register, now the Federal Register is where you actually do fully implement. So there's way more regulations than are in the Federal Register. But here's what he says. Federal Register listing government regulations is now 60,000 pages. Do you guys have all that memorized? And the number of federal crimes has grown roughly 5,000 by some estimates. So he's got a new book called Overruled, The Human Toll of Too Much Law. You might want to go look that up on Amazon. I actually just saw the title of his book this week. I'm getting it. You guys should invest a little time in kind of getting the big picture because it's going to show you how these agencies are going way beyond their authority. Okay, so the Overruled, The Human Toll of Too Much Law, which he co-wrote with former clerk Janine Nitz. Judge Gorsuch said that the ever-expanding system has created, I can't pronounce this word, and probably I'll end up making it sound like a swear word or something, kafesk of maze, where Americans sometimes violate rules and regulations they did not know existed. Sound good? Compliance has become overly onerous, and even regulators sometimes don't know the laws they're being tasked to enforce. Okay? So he's been a judge now 20 years. He told the Reagan Library audience, I've just seen so many cases come through my court where ordinary Americans, decent, hardworking people who are trying to do their best are just getting thwacked by laws unexpectedly. Sound familiar, folks? That's why we developed UR Law. We're on the same page with what he's thinking. This is really where you can put some focus, okay? Anyway, he goes into it in his book. He talks about the commercial fisherman case in Florida, where essentially they put this company into bankruptcy because of there was some destruction of tangible objects that were impeding the federal investigation. Who even knows what that is? And of course, they put this guy through hell. He ultimately won his case, but who wants to have to go through that? Well, now there's Supreme Court precedent to help you win those kind of cases. All right. Anyway, so I'm just giving you a quick overview of the article. You can find this on what site is this on? It says MSN, but he was an interview on Fox News. You can look on Fox News for Gorsuch interview, and a couple other places he's done some interviews. He did Wall Street Journal recently and so forth. Here's the bottom line is I think what I heard recently during the Reagan era, there were something like 300 federal statutes. Now there's over 5,000. I mean, who does that benefit? Ask yourself, who does that benefit? The legal industry. Who writes these rules, regulations? The legal industry. Who profits from it? The legal industry. Are you getting it? I don't have anything against every lawyer that ever walked the planet. I have many friends. I just had a visit with a judge this weekend who I like talking to. Very open-minded and likes talking about these things. But that industry has gotten out of control because it's writing its own existence. It's writing its own script by creating more of these rules, regulations, and laws. Because every time somebody else gets brought in, they need more lawyers, right? So we're way out of balance. The good news is, like that idea I just gave you on that one document, I've got some others that we're eventually going to be bringing out. I'm just trying to finish up all the preliminary work on the delete debt course and getting most of those modules up. But I want to do a next phase where we bring in the constitutional basis and really focusing, because you really can use this stuff. People, I don't trust the courts and they're all corrupt criminals and they're all whatever. The reality is you got to focus on put the burden of proof on them. They have authority. That's always the first thing I've always taught. Not about you. It's not about your status even as much as put the burden of proof on them to prove their authority. And that authority should come from some law that's implemented and clearly explained somewhere. And if it's not, then the court needs to interpret it. And you see the problem for them? They can't do that. They really can't. They're using administrative tribunals to make law. They can't do that. We have to understand there's only three branches of government, not four, and they're using a fourth branch of government that doesn't exist. So that's the basis of the challenge. And then they're violating your constitutional rights when they do all these things, when they enforce these things against you that are administratively created by a tribunal and not actually implemented fully by Congress or the legislature of your state. It may appear to, they may have written something, but they could be going beyond it with their own internal regulatory authorities. So understand the difference between a law and a regulation. That's where you got to understand. And they are going off regulations as to how they do things.